Agriculture Assistance Program for dairy producers and dairy processors. If that's what you're here for, then you are in the right place. So I am joined today by fellow Agency of Agriculture, Food and Market staff. I myself am a grant specialist in the Agricultural Development Division. We also have Diane Bothfeld, Abby Willard, Lauren Masseria, E.B. Flory, and several others who are joining us today. And I'll be taking everyone through the presentation, and then we will have time for questions at the end. So please hold your questions and keep yourself on mute. We will use the chat feature to enter questions. So if you hover over your Microsoft Teams screen, you'll see a little bar at the bottom, and towards the right, a little icon that looks like a conversation bubble. So if you click there, that will open up the chat, and that's where you can enter questions towards the end of the presentation, and Lauren Masseria will be moderating our chat today. So if we do not have time to get to everyone's questions, we will be posting the answers to frequently asked questions on our website. This is the third and final webinar in our webinar series for applicants, so we'll be combining questions and posting the responses by the end of the week. So again, welcome everyone. For those of you just joining, my name is Diana Ferguson. I am going to turn off my video and go ahead and start sharing my screen so that we can get started on the presentation. So once again, we're here today to talk about the Vermont COVID-19 Agriculture Assistance Program, also known as VCAP, and this is specifically in relation to the application for dairy farmers and processors. We have about an hour today, and we do have a lot of content to get through, so thanks for hanging with us. The presentation, recording, and materials will be posted to our website later, so this webinar is recorded and will be available for later viewing in case anyone you work with or anyone you know isn't able to make it today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the program as a whole, including the state legislation that allowed this program to happen, eligibility requirements for funding, timelines for the program, as well as the application process. We'll talk about the application itself, including how to navigate through some of the main portions. We'll also share some helpful links and contact information for those of you who plan on applying. And as I mentioned, toward the end, we'll have a question and answer period. So at the bottom of the screen here is a hyperlink you'll see where the presentation recording and materials will be uploaded tomorrow. And that link also tells you information about the VCAP program as a whole. And there is an icon to click on for additional dairy payment application information. So a word on our program partners here. This is a list of state of Vermont agencies who have been involved in different components of VCAP. Our agency, Agriculture, Food and Markets, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, who is currently running the Vermont Economic Recovery Grant Program, among other funding opportunities, Department of Taxes and Department of Finance and Management, who are involved in payment processing. So everyone here has a unique role and has worked really hard to get to where we are today, and will continue to do so as other components of the program continue to be developed. So here we have the legislation. Bill S-351 was enacted on July 2nd of this year as Act 138 and signed by the governor. And it established the Vermont COVID-19 Agriculture Assistance Program, and that program is made up of federal coronavirus relief fund dollars that are being passed through our agency and able to be used by businesses in agriculture. So $25 million of those funds are available specifically for dairy assistance payments to Vermont-based farmers and processors. The funds in this program are specifically to cover market losses and expenses that are caused by COVID-19 and relevant events within businesses as a result of the public health emergency. The dairy assistance application opened last Friday, July 17th. It's currently live and accepting applications in the online system and will be open until Thursday, October 1st of this year. So one thing we'll discuss later is that under this program, if you are a dairy producer, processor, or both, you can submit up to 2 applications within this application cycle. We know some of you have expenses that you're ready to claim right away, and you're able to do that now. And if you will continue incurring expenses throughout the application period, then you can submit a second application as long as you haven't reached the funding cap with your first application. And so we'll go into further detail about that moving forward. Here we have the overall program timeline for VCAP, and this is a catch-all for the collection of programs, including the dairy assistance application, which is the first application release within VCAP. So as we mentioned, legislation was signed earlier this month, and Governor Scott, as well as Secretary Tebbets, announced this in a press conference on July 14th. The dairy assistance application is open. The non-dairy and other applications will open within a month or so, and application review will be continuing for all of those opportunities throughout the summer and early fall. As we mentioned, the dairy assistance application closes October 1st, and the others will follow shortly after into November. Each will be reviewed and payments will be issued to businesses that are eligible and have approved payment requests by the Vermont Department of Finance and Management through the late summer, early and mid-fall of this year. So we do have a dairy specific timeline coming up in just a few slides. Now we'll talk a little bit about eligibility for dairy assistance funding. So to apply, you must be either a dairy producer or a dairy processor or both. You've got the official definitions here, which are also available in our online materials. And as a business, you must be currently in good standing with the state of Vermont, meaning no active violations. In addition to that, if you're a producer, you must be currently producing milk, or if you are not, but you were producing milk on March 1st, which is a requirement, and you have stopped since then as a result of COVID-related events, you attest to having a good faith plan in place to restart production of milk, or it may also be restarting operation in production of another commodity. So this is not just, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that, but this is an actual plan in place within your business to restart operation, and you'll have to legally attest to that within the application. If you are a dairy processor, you must be currently producing products, and regardless of your business type, you must be able to accurately demonstrate the economic harm that took place and affected your business after March 1st of this year and in direct relation to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So certainly there were a lot of things going on before, during, and currently within all of your businesses. This application is specifically for those things that are related to COVID-19. An important thing to consider is that those eligible to apply for this funding can not be a recipient of another state grant under the coronavirus relief funds. So if you have already received a Vermont Economic Recovery Grant, you would not be eligible to apply. Many of you are still considering which may be the best option for you, and unfortunately we can't as an agency advise you on which is the best, particularly because a couple of those applications have not yet been released. But we do recommend, because this is a relatively lengthy application period, that everyone take time and review all the application materials to determine which is best for your business. So this does not apply if you've received federal aid, which many of you have. So that doesn't mean you're not eligible to apply for this funding. If you've received EIDL, PPP, or other federal funds for COVID relief, it does mean you cannot submit the same costs that have already been covered by federal funding, but only a maximum of one state grant can be received for COVID relief funding. So here we have a list of eligible losses and expenses. Certainly, this list is not comprehensive. We know that every business is different and has been impacted slightly differently. These are some of the more common losses and expenses we expect to see within this application. So those may include loss in revenue due to decline in milk payment price, reduction in sales that has also caused a loss in revenue or a loss of your overall market or market demand, product loss due to storage of an extended time and inability to sell, changes that you've implemented in your workplace to accommodate pandemic-related issues, so social distancing, additional sanitation measures, and that includes PPE, which is personal protective equipment for staff. Any equipment you may have purchased to pivot within your business or production related to COVID-19, and that includes product packaging, and certainly the catch-all category of other documented losses and expenses. So the key here is that not only is it related to the pandemic, but also that you have clear documentation of the cost and the impact of whatever loss or expense that you're claiming in the application, because each individual thing that you enter will have a section that asks for the exact price and documentation that supports the price that you're requesting. As we mentioned, funds that you request cannot have already been covered by other COVID relief funding sources. So if you have already received federal support and those specific items cannot then be included in this application. If you're still waiting to hear back from funding opportunity, then those costs you're still waiting to hear back about cannot be submitted. And we do recommend that if you're considering applying moving forward, that you only apply for a certain cost or expense within one application, because the intent is to not be duplicative at all. So we're happy to answer further questions about that. It's certainly confusing with multiple applications going on within the same time. So one thing that's important to consider here is the ability to apply twice. And this is one of the reasons we have that capability. So if you are waiting to hear back from another funding opportunity and you only receive a partial payment that you requested, or you didn't receive payment at all for something that you applied to, you may have already had an application active in this program. And then at that time, you can submit a second application for any other costs that are not covered through another funding opportunity. So that allows you to submit one right away for the costs you already have that aren't covered by something else, and then continue with another application down the road as you're incurring new costs or costs that have then not been approved by other funding sources. The maximum is 2 applications per business, and each application we'll talk about should be associated with your unique dairy ID number as a business owner. So again, 2 applications per unique dairy ID number before the deadline of October 1st of this year. A few things to consider related to taxes. Non-dairy losses and expenses that are related to COVID-19 can be included in this application, but the key is that they must be in relation to the dairy business's tax ID number. So they must fall under the same legal business entity. So a business cannot then receive another state grant. So if you as a dairy business owner have another operation, whether it's sugaring or other production, you can apply for losses or expenses within this application. Again, if it's the same legal business, but then cannot include those costs in another state grant application. If you have another business operation that's non-dairy that's associated with you or your family, but it operates under a separate tax ID number, then that does not apply in this case. It would not fall under your unique dairy ID number. So in that case, if your other operation is its own legal entity, then that entity would then be eligible to apply for funds under another state program using coronavirus relief funds. Any payment received through this program or other VCAP programs are taxable income. So if you're a recipient, you'll then expect to receive a Form 1099-G from Vermont Department of Finance and Management that lists your payment for the tax year 2020. So something to take note of there. Here are the funding caps depending on dairy business type. So if you are a milk producer and you're a small farm, you're eligible to receive up to $18,300. Certified small farms can receive up to $34,300. Medium farms up to $56,000, and large farm operations up to $100,000. So we know there are quite a variety of scenarios for those of you out there, depending on your business type and how heavily you've been impacted by COVID-19. So some smaller farms may not meet the cap depending on how much funding you've received from other COVID relief sources. Large farms might meet the cap immediately just because of their milk price reduction, and everything in between. So a reminder that the caps are in relation to both potential applications that you submit. So if you max out of this cap with your first application, then you're done after the first. If you receive notification back that you have not received the maximum after your first application, then you are able to submit another up until you have reached the cap for your business category. For dairy processors, the cap is based on the amount of milk that you process. So less than 500 pounds of milk a day is $31,000 maximum. Between 500 and 9,999, it's up to a $40,000 payment. From 10,000 to 49,999, up to $50,000, and more than 50,000 pounds of milk is up to a $60,000 payment. And this information is also available on our website and within our other outreach materials. So here we have the specific timeline for this application. As you all know, the application is currently live and information went out the week of July 13th, including a letter or email directly to businesses that contains your unique business ID number that you need for the application. This is the last of 3 webinars. Again, the recording will be posted within a couple of days for later viewing. The deadline is October 1st of this year, and no applications will be considered after that point. Applications will be reviewed in order that they are submitted between the 17th and the deadline of October 1st. And that'll be about a 1 to 2 week time period for Agency of Agriculture staff to review each application. And then later this month and through mid-fall, those applications that are approved for the payments that are deemed eligible will be sent to Department of Finance and Management, and payments will be processed within 2 to 3 weeks after they've received approval from our agency. So at this point, as all of the review process details are still being finalized, we're estimating that payments will be issued between 3 and 5 weeks after businesses submit their application. Again, they'll be reviewed in the order that they are received. And those who are approved will receive an email notification, and then there will be no payments by direct deposit, but all approved payments will be sent by live check through the U.S. mail. So thank you for hanging in with all of the logistics that we've covered so far. It's certainly a lot to process at once. So now we'll talk a little bit about the application, and these are just some key milestones within the dairy assistance application process. So initially we mentioned that you should have received a letter from the agency with your unique dairy business ID number that you need to begin an application. So please read the full contents of that letter, or if you haven't received it, please reach out to the agency as soon as possible. There's a lot of documentation that's asked for within the online application, so we recommend reviewing that, and we're going to talk about that on the next couple of slides, and collecting everything you need before you get started online, because for simplicity's sake, it will be helpful to have everything you need to get it all done within a shorter time period. At that point, you'll access the application online and register as a user. So it's sort of a 2-step process. You first register your business as a user within the online application system, and once you've done the registration, you are then able to start an application, and we'll show you a screen of what that looks like. Using your unique ID number will automatically populate some of your information in the system. So again, please have that in hand when you sit down to apply. You'll then complete and submit the application, and you'll receive a confirmation notification. And at that point, the application can no longer be edited and will be sent over to the Agency of Agriculture for review. So after that 1 to 2 week time period, approvals or denials will be sent, or a staff member may follow up to say that they need additional information. And in that case, your application will be held in the system until that's resolved. And then those that are approved, payment will be mailed within 2 to 3 weeks after the time of approval. So something that's important to consider is that if you enter a whole bunch of costs, and we do recommend that you, if you haven't reached your cap, enter everything that hasn't been covered by another funding source that's related to COVID-19, even if you're not totally sure if it's eligible. And if one of your expenses or losses that you claim isn't eligible, that will not throw out your application. It just means that that item will not be considered for reimbursement, and therefore the rest of your application will move forward and be reviewed, and you'll be able to receive a partial payment. So don't be afraid and think that if you're not sure about something, that will cancel out your application. It will still move forward even if some of your expenses are not approved. Here's a list of those documents that will be needed as an applicant to move forward and complete an application. So starting with your unique dairy ID number, that's the first thing you need to register as a user within the system. A completed W-9 form is recommended. Hopefully the majority of you sent your completed W-9 to the agency by mail within the past couple of months. And if a completed and accurate W-9 was sent to us, then your information will be pre-populated in the system, your tax information. If for any reason that information is incomplete or incorrect, you will need to update it or correct it, and then we'll need to upload a current and accurate W-9 form. And so that will apply to a handful of you. So again, it'll be a good thing to have on hand to make extra sure that the information that's in the application system and your actual legal W-9 document are 100% matching in content. You'll also need documentation of the amounts of other federal or state aid that you've applied for or received. And there's some examples there: PPP, EIDL, dairy margin coverage. So please have those on hand as well. And then of course, we'll need all the documentation of the expenses that you're claiming within this application, whether it's lost revenue or particular COVID-related expenditures since March 1st. So receipts, invoices, there's quite a variety of options of ways you can document those losses or expenses. And again, we recommend having those on hand. And if you are not sure if it's satisfactory, you're welcome to reach out and we can answer questions about that. So for processors, you'll need proof of manufactured milk volumes in 2019 and 2020. You'll need your full month milk checks if you are a producer, and we will talk a little bit about that in the slides coming up as well. Here are a couple of unique scenarios based on your business. So we mentioned earlier that everyone received their unique dairy ID number, and for each that you received, and most of you probably just received one, then you will fill out one application or a duplicate application if you haven't reached your cap before October 1st. So if you are an operation with multiple locations, such as a producer processor, then you'll submit multiple applications, meaning you would have received perhaps 2 unique dairy ID numbers and would then submit one application per operation. There is a unique application for dairy producers and processors, so you'll select the one that's applicable to you, or both if it's both. The exception is large farm operations, which might have multiple farm locations operating under the same permit. And in that case, you will have just received one dairy ID number and then would just complete one application, but list your multiple farm locations within, and we'll show you that as well. And just another reminder about the W-9 that you may have thought you sent it in and everything was A-okay, but if you get in the system and there's some information missing or that needs to be corrected, you'll need to upload a current W-9 as part of the application. Here are some tips that are important to consider as an applicant. Internet Explorer does not cooperate with the online application system, so please don't use it. So use any other up-to-date internet browser like Firefox or Chrome, anything except Internet Explorer. The application itself will save and you can revisit it at any time. So once you've registered in the system, you can log out and log in to access your application as many times as you need to before you submit it. The caveat being that it's possible you could lose some data if you haven't completed a full page. So if you are working on the application and you are ready to take a lunch break and you're halfway through a page, then make sure to finish the page that you're on and save it before you walk away. We know that the application can time out, and if your full page isn't complete, then it's possible you'll lose some of your information. We already said once it's submitted, it can't be edited. So certainly there are unique scenarios where there may be more information needed, but there is an application review step where you can look at everything that you've submitted all on one page, and that will be your last chance to make corrections before you submit your application. Here are some resources for applicants, and they're all compiled into this one web page with the very long URL, and this is the VCAP page that's specifically for dairy producers and processors who are going to be applying. So the things that you'll find on this page that will be updated continuously are the information sheet about the Dairy Assistance Payment Program and all of the basics that you need to know. Most of you should have seen this already. There's an application guide, which is a PDF step-by-step instruction guide that shows you what to expect within the application itself and gives a little bit of explanation about how to navigate through each step. So that's a really handy tool. You'll have a direct link there to the W-9 form that's blank to fill out and instructions for completing it if you need to do that, as well as responses that are yet to be posted, but following this webinar, like I said, we'll be combining the frequently asked questions from our series of webinars and posting responses on the website, as well as the webinar recording from today and any other materials that are relevant. So this is sort of the all-purpose dairy application resource page. We recommend if you visit it, keep it bookmarked because we may be updating the frequently asked questions as time goes on. So now that we've laid the groundwork a little bit, we'll talk about some more technical pieces of the application within the online system. So at the top, you've got the link to step 1, which is registering as a user. So as you can see, the first component of the registration form is a letter that begins "Dear Dairy Farmer or Processor" with some important program information. So please make sure to review that. Reminder that this is the only way you can submit an application. Paper applications are not accepted. So after you've read that registration form letter, you'll be asked to acknowledge the program terms and confirm your eligibility. And at that point, a user registration form will pop up. Your ID number will be asked for right here at the beginning, and it'll be a simple registration form with your contact information. Please use an email address that you check regularly. There's only one email address that the system will send communications to about the status of your application. So your email and phone number should be the one that you are readily available to be reached. And your username here will also automatically be your email address, so no need to adjust it. Your password will need to be something that is a minimum of 10 characters with one number and one special character, and that information is also in the application guide. There will be an option to select if you are being helped by a technical assistance provider with this application, if they're submitting it on your behalf. So again, this is the first step to completing an application. At this point, you technically have not begun an application, but you are registering yourself as a user in the system, and then your organization's registration will essentially hold your application or any number of applications that you might be creating and submitting. To start a new application after you've registered, you'll get what's called a dashboard screen, and the icon on the top right will allow you to start a new application. It will pull up these options for dairy processor plant application, and the other will say dairy process or farm, dairy producer farm application. So if you should start an application that corresponds to whatever business type your unique dairy business ID applies to, or if you're both, you will start one of each. After you've begun the application, you'll see this navigational screen. So on the left, you can see number 1, applicant information is highlighted in blue because that's the page that we are on. And once again, it'll ask for your unique dairy ID number. So this is your navigational tool that will show you at any point where you are within the application. You can go to the previous page. There will be a back button, and you'll proceed one by one through these steps in numerical order. After you plug in your unique dairy ID, assuming your W-9 has been received by the agency, your business information will auto-populate here. That's what we've been referencing. Your business legal name. There's some optional fields here, NACE code, subcode, and whether your business is minority, veteran, or women-owned that are optional to complete. Once again, this is a section that you need to make doubly sure is completely accurate with your current tax information. And again, if anything's missing or incorrect, you'll need to correct it and upload a new W-9. So this is the first page of the application. And as we keep moving, there will be a little bit of differentiation between the producer and the processor applications. So if you are a producer, you'll have the ability to add each farm. If you're a large farm operation, you'll add each location separately. So after you've clicked the button that says add farm, which we don't have shown here, you'll have a screen that asks you to please enter your milk payment price and total pounds of milk production for each month that you're claiming a loss. And that starts with January of this year as a base price. If 1813 was not your pay price, you'll click other and then upload documentation, your milk check from the month of January. And then every month that you're claiming a loss up until the month that you're applying. So one clarification is that this is not, do not upload your check from the month you received it. So if you're clicking March and you're entering your price and poundage, you'll be uploading the check that you received in April, meaning that it applies to your payment and your production for the month of March. So if you're submitting an application now, you may not have your check for July yet, so you would go through June. The upload button allows you to search files from your computer, from your desktop or other files, and select them and upload them directly, or you also have the option to drag and drop, meaning if you have it on your desktop, you can click and drag the file right into the application in the internet browser. And the last question on this page is whether or not you received funding through the CFAP program. So that's the first sort of nitty-gritty piece of the producer application. The processor application asks for a comparison of manufactured milk volume from the same months. So you will need to upload documentation such as make sheets, other records, profit and losses that show your 2019 production as well as 2020 in the same month. And so we know that throughout the application, there are a lot of places where you're going to be uploading things, but it won't let you proceed until you've done that. So don't worry, it will give you a flag in case you miss something. And the next page of the processor application asks for changes in sales from year to year. So if you're claiming a loss for the months that you see here, you'll be entering your sales amounts pre-COVID and post-COVID and uploading documentation that supports that. And then at the bottom, you'll be asked to give an explanation of why the sales amount changed and any other further information you can give to support that change. So just a final reminder that having all of your pricing and documentation that you need to upload in hand when you sit down to the application will be really helpful. The next page is sort of a catch-all page for other harm that's taken place as a result of COVID-19. And so the other economic harm page is where you will upload, if you haven't reached your cap in just talking about milk pricing and production, all of the other items that you're claiming reimbursement for as an expense or a loss. So if you confirm that you've encountered other economic harm, you'll then see a long list of items that you can select from. And we've just included one here as an example, which is PPE, personal protective equipment. So you'll be able to go through the list, check the box if any of those items apply to your business. And once you do that, you will have the requirement to enter the price of that item, upload documentation that shows the cost of that expense or loss and the reason it was incurred, and then give a short description of what that item was and maybe why that happened and what you're using it for. So this is the page that will likely, for some of you, will take the longest. It holds a lot of content. There is the option to, if the checkboxes aren't satisfactory and there are costs that are not listed, then there are a handful of checkboxes that say additional expense or loss. And so that's meant to catch anything that's not listed. And so that may be if you are under a supply management program and you've been directed to reduce your production, then a letter stating that information. It may be any other unique COVID-related cost that you've encountered. So again, you have the option to upload the predetermined items or those that are captured under additional costs, and you will be able to define what each of those things are. So those are steps 1 through 4, and step 5 is to review your application content. So you'll get a screen that looks like this right at the top that starts with your legal information. And as you scroll down, we'll show you all of the content that you've entered in the application. So this is the opportunity to make sure that everything looks correct, that you've uploaded the right documentation in the right place, that nothing is missing or appears incorrectly. If it does, you can click the back button to go to the previous page or back to the dashboard to start again from the beginning and proofread everything. Once everything is correct and complete, you can click through to the certification, which is the next to last step. And what happens with the certification is the first thing you'll do is identify the type of technical assistance or multiple types you're interested in receiving by highlighting each type and clicking the right facing arrow. So once you have at least one type of technical assistance in the selected column, you will then see a list of attestations, and these are extremely important legal language statements for you to review and attest to each one by clicking the checkbox. So that is the certification and legal acknowledgement of all the program terms as the final step before you sign your application. And the last step is the legal signature, and typing it in to this box constitutes your legal signature, even though it's electronic. Once you've typed in your signature, today's date will automatically populate next to it, and that will be your final step before submission. And then you hear because you have just done a lot of work. So after submission, you'll receive a confirmation screen with your confirmation submission number to take note of, as well as any follow-up contact information if you need to speak to someone. You can then click out of the application, or if you click finish, it will take you back to your dashboard. So that's what you'll do if you have multiple applications going. You will then return to your list of applications, or if you're just submitting the one, you can then within the dashboard see your submitted application. So even though it can't be edited anymore, you can see the full contents of the application you just submitted for reference. Here are support contacts for any of you who will be applying if you get stuck or just need clarification. The recommendation to pursue first is this hyperlink, which has an automated chat feature. It's on the VCAP homepage, which is this link, or the dairy specific information page. It appears on both, so you can enter a question and you'll get an automated response. If that still didn't answer your question, you're welcome to reach out to agency staff at this email address or this hotline number. So please do that if you have additional questions. We do know that at high times of application submission, there may be a lot of people calling and emailing, and so there may be wait times before you receive a response, and we will handle messages in the order that they're received. So the agency ourselves are able to answer eligibility questions or overarching questions, but if you need technical support in terms of someone sitting with you to work on the application, to help advise you through the process, and the more technical side of getting through the application and submitting it, then there are farm viability program advisors through Vermont Housing and Conservation Board who are making themselves available for that type of support, which we're grateful for, and we recommend contacting Mariah Noth at this email or phone number, and at that point you'll be connected with an advisor who can help you with those technical parts of the application. So that is the end of our formal presentation. This is just a reminder of our agency's homepage. Our website has a lot of information on it, and even though we may be communicating mostly about this in the near future, there are always great pieces of information on our website, including other COVID-19 relief resources, business development resources. There's press releases, lots of information about upcoming events and other non-COVID related funding opportunities. So please take a minute to visit if you haven't anytime recently. And now we are going to take some time to move into questions and answers. So hopefully if you have been sitting on a question that hasn't been answered, that you can then go ahead and enter it in the chat box. And Lauren Masseria will help us moderate and go through the chat questions. So Lauren, go right ahead.